How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Pomp just went on Cnbc Squawk Box to start the week off, and people get pretty animated. People have very different viewpoints. At one point, they stop talking to Pomp altogether and just discuss between themselves, go back and forth about really what is the benefit of holding Bitcoin, what's the benefit of holding any asset. It's really interesting, and one of the bearish points that's pointed out, one of the bearish things that they talk about, I think is actually a great benefit to the future of Bitcoin. And it's something that a lot of people don't understand yet. So I'll explain that a little bit after the interview. Let me just say, though, before we start, there is a link to Margex underneath the video. In case you want to start trading cryptocurrency on leverage, you can check out the link to Margex. There's also a link down there to CoinW as well. So Margex is actually rolling out spot trading this week. So you can actually buy spot cryptocurrencies, sell spot cryptocurrencies. You can also trade between different assets, and you can also trade futures as well, just like CoinW. And you can start doing that without the KYC process, so you don't need to send in your social security number or anything like that. Just put in an email, a password, check their terms and conditions, and you can start trading today.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Take a look at Bitcoin prices this morning. We're just hovering under $70,000 right about now. This month, expected to bring the next Bitcoin halving, in which the reward for mining cryptocurrencies drops by half. Joining us right now on All Things Crypto, Anthony Pompliano, Pomp Investment founder, of course, and partner. Good morning to you. We were trying to figure out, on one end, it's like a risk-on situation. On the other, it's arguably supposed to be a hedge, and it's very hard for me to get around the idea that it's both, though maybe you have a view that it is. Then there was the halving that's coming, so that's sort of an idiosyncratic one piece of the puzzle, but not something that's like an ongoing piece, so you could argue it is in certain ways. And then you have the ETF, which was also sort of an idiosyncratic moment in time. So put that puzzle together for us.
Yeah, Bitcoin is the most exciting asset in financial markets because of what you just described. It's this highly complex thing that everyone's trying to figure out. And I think for some people it is a risk-on asset, and for other people it is a hedge against inflation or a store of value. And so if we just look at
Can it be both?
Of course, it can be different things to different people. Right now, I think one of the most interesting parts about this is if you go and you talk to someone on Wall Street, why are they buying it? They're buying it because they want the price exposure via the ETFs. But if you go and you talk to someone maybe in a country where they actually are worried about somebody seizing their assets, they're buying Bitcoin because they literally want to make sure that they can hold on to the economic value. And so you have an asset that this is not unique just to Bitcoin in the sense of some assets serve different purposes for different people. I think Bitcoin, because of its global nature, because of the decentralization, and because it was adopted by individuals before the institutions, we're just seeing it kind of exaggerated as we watch the asset become adopted. Now, we just hit a really important milestone before the halving. We just had the highest weekly, monthly, and quarterly close for Bitcoin.
Right.
And so the last 4 times that that's happened, Bitcoin has appreciated at least 300% through the rest of the bull market. Right. Doesn't mean it's going to happen again, but to have that happen before the halving, it's kind of like the demand shock happened. Now we're going to have the supply shock. Right. And so it's hard just to see how the prices continue to go up.
I want to ask you this question, and it goes to the risk on versus the inflation hedge. So I just got back from South Africa. Mm-hmm. And I literally asked everybody who was around when I was in Zimbabwe, in Zambia. By the way, the rand has done terribly. Of course. It had been inflated away. Horrific situation. And I would ask anybody who was around, very wealthy people, folks who are middle class, folks who are at the bottom of this, and I said, do you own any Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Almost to a T, they said no. That actually was not a thing. And this was, and by the way, it wasn't a scientific study, but a lot of people I asked about Bitcoin because I thought that the conversation we have around this table is that somehow the unbanked and everybody who's in these countries that is struggling with inflation is buying Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And they're, at least from what I saw, they're not. And then I went to look at the flows, and it also is true that they're not.
Yeah.
The math does not suggest that the hedge argument on inflation is actually a real one. And I just wonder whether it's sort of used to sort of sprinkle fairy dust to other people who then are speculating. I think there's a lot of people out there that are speculating and want it obviously to go higher, and it's a risk-on asset. That's my take on it at the moment.
Yeah, so I think it depends on what country you go look at, and I'll give you kind of two examples, one that supports yours and one that would contradict it. If you go to somewhere like Nigeria, it's definitely true that people are buying Bitcoin, and I don't know why it's happening in Nigeria, not in South Africa, but we see that. Then if you go somewhere like Argentina, there are some people buying Bitcoin, but there's a lot of people who want dollar-backed stable coins, and they actually want the dollar, not Bitcoin. And so I think country by country, you're going to see different adoption of these technologies. Now, what I will say, though, is you don't have to go to emerging markets to find a reason why people want to buy this, right? If you look at the United States dollar, it's lost 25% of its purchasing power since 2020. Bitcoin is up 800% during that same time period. And so if we go back to 2020, if you remember, Paul Tudor Jones, Stanley Druckenmiller, many of these people came out and said, look, I think it's an inflation hedge. Now, hedges are always this weird thing where people expect you buy it and then inflation explodes the next day. But instead, what we've seen is that Bitcoin is a free market asset that trades forward looking. And so Bitcoin's rise, it's up. We have 7 straight months of Bitcoin in the green up till this past month. And so why is it going up?
And
some of it is the ETFs. Well, inflation is coming down year over year, but inflation is actually going up month over month.
It's anticipating the next easing cycle. That's what it's anticipating.
So you could argue, one, it is anticipating the next easing cycle. You could also argue the alarm bell is going off, and actually inflation is not coming down month over month. It's going up, and people see that, and they're buying Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin going up is telling us, wait a second, inflation is a bigger problem than we actually thought.
During the hiking cycle, it went from 65,000 down to 17,000.
Correct.
You don't think the majority of people that are buying the ETF today or even buying underlying Bitcoin are doing it because they think the train is leaving the station and they want to be on the train? And that's what this is about.
Why would they have thought the train's leaving the station at 25,000?
Well, I think unfortunately what happens, as you know, is people like to get on the train once the train has practically left the station. That's how this is.
It went to 17,000. Why would people, when it's dropped from 65, when you were looking at it from 7,
right.
You know, and like, why would anyone buy this after?
I think there was a lot of people who were very nervous about it after FTX and the collapse.
That's what I mean. So why? Right. What do you mean they're getting on the train when the train is turned around?
I think they see the ETF. No, I'm saying that I think that now they see the ETF. They see it moving back. They think, okay, now
25 to 40, I think, was speculation on the ETF was going to get approved. 40 to 70 is definitely the ETF flows are here. But I think, again, going back to where we started the conversation, is this is a highly complex environment where Bitcoin is serving different purposes to different people, and one that makes it attractive to a lot of folks.
But I guess what I'm saying is it may serve different purposes to different people. But if you told me that 90% of the people were speculating, in my mind, this is my own thesis, I think 80 to 90% of the folks who are buying this thing are buying it because it's a risk on, the train is leaving, or I think the train is leaving, and I want to get in on the action. And that there's another 10 or maybe 20%, maybe, who have this sort of inflation hedge idea that around their own exposure to their own currency. Look, I don't think it's a 50-50 thing. I don't think it's a... You see what I'm saying?
Well, what you're calling out is just a societal trend, right? We've become a society of gamblers. If you think about, we have zero-day options. Now we're more than 50% of options trading. We have sports betting, right? We have meme coins trading like 1980s boiler room, penny stocks. This is all happening. And so, again, why is that occurring? The dollar has lost 25% of its purchasing power in 4 years. We have $1.1 trillion of credit card debt. We have 43 million Americans that have federal student debt. The average balance is $37,000. People have lost hope. They do not have hope. How are you supposed to live in a country where it is cheaper to rent than buy a home in 50 major metros? You don't have hope. And so what do?
You think this is a lottery ticket? This is a gamble?
I think that if you go and you buy a lottery ticket, it's 300 million to 1 odds. I think there's people right now saying, you know what, a meme coin has better odds than a lottery ticket. I think there's a lot of people who say,
pick your asset. If you want to pick your asset for the greater fool theory, is NVIDIA? People, trains leaving the station, and I got to get on it.
I don't disagree.
Pick your meme stock, pick your commodity, cocoa, pick whatever you want. I mean, there's no doubt that when there's liquidity everywhere, that it's going to chase assets and things. But I don't think that because that's one of the reasons it goes higher doesn't undercut the fundamental case for that asset. That you have to, on a case-by-case basis,
that is the fundamental question. And, only, 5, 10, 20 years now, we'll know the answer.
I think there are people that do understand it, that don't have that question about the fundamental underlying.
There are people who have certainty. They should or not, it's a question.
Another key piece is Bitcoin is a decentralized organization that has no marketing team, right? And so price is the marketing of Bitcoin. When the price goes up, speculators come in. Right. But what ends up happening is when we get those drawdowns, some of them stick around and become kind of Bitcoin believers. Some of them do leave.
Netflix is a great asset. It's either worth $800 or $170. You get the train leaving the station and it's up to $800. You get the strict train comes back to the station, it's $180. I mean, it's an asset that people watch. Subscribers come in, they have new hit shows, they do all that. There's no questioning the underlying asset value, but on any given day, greater fool theories or momentum or euphoria.
If you own a company, you own a percentage of that company, you own a percentage of the revenue, you own a percentage of the earnings that come through. I mean, that's the argument. If it's a company that pays dividends, you get a percentage of that.
You got to do Graham and Dodd, you got to go way down the line.
Graham and Dodd is productive assets.
You got to go way down the line of where you hope. I mean, with a stock that doesn't pay a dividend, you can't say that.
No, but with a stock that has earnings, with a company that has earnings, you get a portion of that's the difference between a productive and non-productive.
If you get the dividend, it doesn't flow through.
Production. You still say this is a productive asset.
But you're hoping the dividends go up over time. You're hoping dividends go up. It's not even
dividends. If you don't pay a dividend, you still have a percentage of the earnings of that company, and you figure that will make your stock more valuable over time because of the earnings that the company's kicking off.
That's the concept. That's at least the conceit.
It is. But to go and see something trading at 200 times revenue.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you guys. They're going to continue this debate during the commercial.
It's not profitable.
Trading at 200 times revenue, it has to do.
And it has no profits.
We're back to whether it's.
All right, that was really interesting. Obviously, they make some interesting points in that clip. But at some points, the hosts just talk amongst themselves instead of talking to Pomp. And it shows you how much they care about the subject, how much they feel differently about the subject. And I think they did point out something pretty interesting as well. I pointed this out too. Argentina inflation is nuts. Like the inflation rate hit around 300% in the last year, meaning if you had $1, it's now worth 25 cents in a year. But in this article, it talks about how Argentinians have been buying Bitcoin more than ever, looking at March and February. But the amount of buys is still pretty small. Like you can see 35K buys in, I think this is a week. Yeah, 35K buys in a week. So we're talking about maybe six figures, 100,000 people buying in a month. That's still not that much compared to their population. So while there are some countries that experience high inflation, it's not like everyone is starting to buy Bitcoin. Now, that would be a bearish thing from some people, like Andrew points that out, like, hey, people aren't actually using this in countries like South Africa. But I think some of the best bull theses, some of the best reasons to buy an asset actually come from the bearish points. So some might point out that some countries aren't buying this as an inflation hedge. Okay. Well, the price is still 70,000, and there are countries that can benefit from this. Now, this is something that I absolutely love. Sometimes I feel like people point out certain bearish thesis. Now, I absolutely love this because I think some of the most bullish points or some of the most bullish things about an asset actually come from some of the bearish theses. But some of the best reasons to buy an asset come from some reasons that people think you shouldn't buy an asset. For example, some people like Andrew might say, well, people in Argentina aren't really buying that much Bitcoin. So that kind of cuts down one of the major points that people use is that Bitcoin can be a shield for people against inflation. Okay, well, the numbers still work out. Bitcoin is held up much better than the Argentinian peso. It's up nearly 10x from the old all-time high in USD terms, where Bitcoin was 69,000. Now, we're at 70,000 on Bitcoin, basically the same price, but it's performed 10 times better in other markets than it has here in the US or maybe in your own country. So yeah, people should buy this, and yet people still haven't started to buy it heavily. So what if this country starts pushing Bitcoin more, people start buying more Bitcoin? Well, that's obviously going to have a positive effect on the price. What if every other country that has this kind of inflation starts buying Bitcoin? Well, that is a huge push up in the price, right? So it might be hard for some people to weather this storm where, Bitcoin does go down 55% in a year or two, but they know that over a year or two, their own currency is going to go down 70, 80%. So they need to put it somewhere. What's the lesser of two evils? Probably Bitcoin. So I think that's really interesting. One of the bearish points in that interview is actually one of the most bullish points to me, in that there's still billions and billions of people that haven't bought Bitcoin that should be buying Bitcoin. Now, let me know your thoughts on all this underneath the video. Let me know if you think this is a good point to make that you could use in a conversation with someone. Thank you so much for watching. Again, you can check out the links to Margex and to CoinW underneath the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.